I'm Tara Grenovd with the Grounding and Growing Leadership Podcast, powered by Align, and this is episode number 1. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode, our very first episode. We are so excited that you've decided to join us and listen. Thank you for your time. We're going to dive straight in this first episode and dive into a common question regarding leadership, and that is there such a thing as a natural-born leader? How we approach our leadership is not only important to how we show up and what we understand about ourselves and how other people experience us, but also it's important for us to understand our leadership approach so that we can show up with the confidence that it takes to be effective and be a good leader. So this myth that there's such a thing as either you're a natural born leader or you're not is not only not helpful, but spoiler alert, it's not true. Something you should know about us up front is that we use Clifton Strengths as a framework for a lot of our conversations. So if you want to know more about your strengths, more about Clifton Strengths as an assessment, or if you want to take the assessment, please reach out to me, tara@aligntransform.com. And we hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the Grounding and Growing Leadership Podcast, where everyone is a leader and leadership starts with you.
I'm Tara.
And I'm Pamela.
Thank you for listening and inviting us along on your leadership journey. So Pamela, just last week, I was in this client meeting, and I don't know if you get this question, but I sure do every once in a while. Are people born to be leaders? Do people either have it, whatever it is, or not? And I often hear this question from people who are questioning whether or not they are a leader or can be a leader, or when they're questioning whether or not someone else can be.
Yeah, I do hear that question, and I hear it even more around their title or their role, that all of a sudden it says I'm here in leadership or I'm not here. My role says that I'm part-time, or my role says that I'm not in a corporate setting. And so there's a misconception just around that.
Yeah, I think, and once we have a title, somehow we're suddenly supposed to have these leadership qualities just bestowed upon us. They're going to show up magically somehow. And really, I mean, I think you and I have a similar philosophy here, and that is anyone can lead, and all of us do lead in different areas of our life.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter what the title is and what season of life that you're in. But usually where I start with those that I'm in a meeting with is, what's the first role of a leader? And it's in leading yourself. And people don't recognize that's leadership. They just think that's living. But if we don't recognize it, then we're not being intentional enough with the fact that we get to choose what we are doing, not doing, thinking, not thinking, where we're putting our time, all of it. And that's where the crisis comes, I think, for people, when we feel like choices are being made for us.
Yeah, and there is a lot of unintentionality in leadership. We are just looking at outcomes typically, or what our team is supposed to be doing, and not necessarily pausing to really think about, how am I showing up as a leader and what does that look like? And that's why I really feel strongly leadership is not something you arrive at. It's not something you are or aren't. It's a practice. And it starts by practicing by leading yourself, as you were saying, really considering what those practices are.
So I love that you said leadership is a practice. There's a couple different ways that you could define that word. So what do you mean by practice, and how do you encourage people to practice?
Yeah, it's a loaded word. We're this morning, just you and I learning and practicing, right? I think the word practice implies that there isn't a defined endpoint, and that it's something that you are actively and intentionally working towards. I also think it speaks to consistency. And if you think about leadership as a practice, how we show up consistently, practicing our leadership as opposed to being or not being a leader, I think also provides some freedom for people, because can I show up and practice leadership today? Looks very different than, let me put on this persona of leadership.
Yeah, when you walk into a room thinking that you have this ideal of what leadership is and what a leader looks like and what they need to do and what they need to say, of course, you're not going to show up as yourself. Being able to listen to others and even listening to yourself as you're walking into that space and attending to how you're showing up. Am I showing up needing to impress people? Am I showing up needing to look like what this vision is of a leader for myself? Am I distracted? when people come in to see me and they're struggling with today, I will give the date on the calendar and say, no one has lived this date out before. And so we are all practicing. And what we get to evaluate at the end of the day is not that we won or didn't win. It's that, you know what, these things I did a little bit better, or tomorrow I get to try again. When I'm practicing on when I can live with that grace on my life, then I actually sleep a lot better. I walk into meetings a lot better. And I also get to know that I get to try again tomorrow.
Yeah, I get to try again tomorrow, which comes back to that intentionality and that mindfulness. I love the quote by Parker Palmer that leadership is the, and I'm going to get this quote a little bit wrong, but leadership is the unusual power that we have to project either our light or our shadow onto others. And so we have to be intentional with how we show up as leadership. That's why I talk about leadership, and we talk about leadership as a practice, is what is the practice of showing up and bringing light in leadership, in how we project that onto the people that we're working with and leading. I mentioned before, we both believe that everyone is a leader. So you are leading yourself, but you also have a circle of influence. Now, depending on where you are in life, that circle might feel small to you or it might feel really large to you. But whether you're impacting one person or many, you have a circle of influence when it comes to leadership. And it doesn't matter what your role is, you have an opportunity to project light or shadow in how you're showing up. And so that practice of leadership matters.
Yeah.
It matters for you and for others.
Yeah. And in the unseen small places, it's so important that you still see yourself that way, even if it's two people, because when you recognize that whole quote there of light and shadow, the perspective of being able to see light in other people, I think directly correlates with your intentionality to show up as light for them. When they're practicing, and you can share that light and allow them to practice as well, the relationship can then be collaborative. And you might be the one inviting them into something. You can't convince someone to do something they don't want to do, at least in a way that you want them to show up in doing it.
Yeah.
And so again, that it's that influence and it's their opportunity to choose to say yes.
So often, I think we equate, even subconsciously, leadership with control. And we have somehow the ability as leaders to control the situation, to control people, which is false. A lie, a myth.
Yeah.
We, in fact, when we approach our leadership that way is when we are probably less effective, because we're not coming in really seeking to bring people along. It's more demanding people come along. And we have a greater opportunity to do damage as leaders when we really believe that our job is to control.
And it is really a form of manipulation rather than influencing them to want to take the next step.
Yeah, inviting people along. The initial question that I received last week had, I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. We're dealing with strengths and talking about strengths in a lot of my coaching sessions. And it had to do with, are there specific talents or strength types that are more or less prone to effective leadership? And the answer to that is really no, there are not. However, I would say that there's two factors to consider. One is our talents are neutral in and of themselves. And so you can show up on the raw side of a talent and be really ineffective. So you might be showing up in your strengths, but if they're showing up raw and selfish and self-centered, reactive, and more instinctual, you're probably not going to be effective in your leadership when you're showing up that way. So there's an opportunity to continue to grow and mature. And I know different circumstances every day happen where I can end up showing up raw. I'm probably overly aware of when it's happening and it's stressful. I don't know about you.
I am super aware. And so I have to then get out of my head. I use the word attend a lot. As people listen to this podcast, I guess I'll just define that for what it is. It's what is paying attention to me. So I have to attend to it. And some people call that an aha, a light bulb moment. Sometimes it shows up as a trigger and that it's something that I need to work on. And as I'm meeting with someone else, someone will voice something and I'll have an internal thought that could bring me back into my own story. And so I call that attending to me. And I have to acknowledge it very quickly and say, thank you, mind, and thank you, body, that you're noticing this. And I will attend to you later. So, Tara, as a strengths coach, I know that you're able to spot mature leaders in their strength and raw. And so, maybe give us an example of one area of strength and help us to recognize what it would look like being mature in that and what it would look like being raw.
Sure. So we can take any strength, but I'll take achiever because it's one of the highest occurring themes. And a lot of leaders have high achiever. I do not, by the way. I'm not blessed with that one, but you do.
I do. I have all the things that make me quick to respond and quick to measure and also quick to go to shame if I blow it.
Yeah. The quick part is probably also your activator working with your achiever, but the really wanting to hit the mark, achieve the goal, cross it off the list, get it done. That's achiever. Really enjoying the success of accomplishment and getting something done. When it's raw, it can look like saying yes to too many things. And when you're a leader, that might mean taking on a greater workload than your team can handle and thinking, but we can do it. When it's raw, it also assumes that other people have the same desire and level and pace and capacity that you do, and getting really frustrated when others don't or don't show up in that way. When it's mature, achiever pauses to define what a success really look like here instead of just saying yes indiscriminately, and can prioritize a little bit more. And when it's mature, achiever also considers the capacity of others without necessarily judgment, but also just more realistically, what can we handle as a team? Or individually, if you're leading yourself, what can I handle and what can I say yes to so that I'm setting myself up for success, knowing that I will beat myself up on the back end of this if I take on too much.
Since you talked about one of my strengths, I will also say where raw shows up with achiever is I tend to think very big picture, but because I want to get it done in my time frame and do it quickly, I may just assign that to me at the expense of including other people because I know that I can get it done quickly because I know I have a lot of capacity and it's on my radar to do. And then people can feel overlooked, and that's not my intention. It's just that I can see it. And so that's that maybe combination of activator, achiever again, but without trying to be harmful. I just try to get it done quickly. And what I need to recognize is that the team needs to be involved with all of it. And there are different voices. And I need to raise other people up into that and just breathe my way through the fact that if the deadline or the timeline for this is a certain point, I might receive it a second before and be okay with that.
Well, and I would imagine that causes what I call natural points of tension. So we all have natural points of tension based on how we're wired. So between our strengths and talents, there are natural points of tension. And then between people and their talents and strengths, there are natural points of tension. But Pamela, I know you also have high relator and connectedness and empathy. And so there is not a desire to do harm. Connectedness and empathy, first and foremost, want to make sure people are okay. So that desire to get things done when it causes disconnection, causes discord for you too.
Yeah, so I have a hard time living with myself.
Yeah. And how do you reconcile that in your leadership? How do you reconcile and be okay with the fact that you are both? And I think that's part of leadership, growing your awareness around the complexity of you. You know, I have high connectedness as well. We share that. I think it's one of the things that really connects us and bonds us.
Yeah.
And I also have high self-assurance and command. And so I can just go walk off in my own direction and dance to my own beat. And I never intend to do harm, but there is this push-pull for me between this desire for autonomy and this desire for a tribe or connection or to bring people along. And that tension, I think, is where leadership comes in. How do you manage that tension for yourself? And then how do you help a team manage that tension? But anyone can learn to manage that tension. And you're going to have different tension based on how you're wired. As you're listening, you're thinking about places where you wrestle with yourself and you get frustrated with yourself. I do this, and on the one hand, it's beautiful, and on the other hand, it causes problems. So as I say that, there's something that's probably showing up to you as you're listening and you're thinking about, How do you manage that so that you're transparent and authentic with yourself and the people you're leading? And how do you have a plan for how you handle that so that you can practice leadership when that tension happens and when that comes up? And for some of us, we live in that tension every day.
Yeah, and I think the relator and the relationship and the connection with your team is a big part of it. I know with the teams that I work with, I give them permission to be able to speak into that. And I of course want to hear it graciously as anyone would, to be able to say, I know this was not on your radar or you weren't aware that it appeared this way. But because you've given me permission to share this in your life about how I experience this, I need you to know that this is how I experience this. And what I give myself permission to do in that place is not be reactive and put up a fear based wall. So, walls are always fear based. We'll talk about this in another podcast. Boundaries are something that you put in loving. But when I put up a wall of defense, it's always based on fear and something to do with shame and self protection. So, instead of having that wall go up, I see a person with goodwill across from me who wants to make me aware of something that I might have been blind to. And I pause and take a deep breath and I give myself permission to hear what they're actually telling me and the goodness behind it, that they're trying to help our team connect in a better way. And they're also helping me in my leadership. So in self-leading, then I'm also processing very quickly how I'm receiving this feedback from the person that I've given permission to give me feedback, to give it to me.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, if you're a leader and you're listening right now, have you created an environment where it's safe for people to ask for what they need and for people to give permission, for me to share authentically, here's my intention, and I invite you to give feedback? That isn't always safe in every culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's the initial question of, are some people born, or do some people have more natural leadership abilities? I think it's important to understand your leadership style and the cultures in which you can succeed in your leadership. So not every culture is built for every leader, and that's real. So everyone is a leader, everyone has the capacity to lead no matter your role, but not every culture is accepting of every style. And that's reality, and that's okay, because there's some leadership styles that are more challenging than others. And unless you've done a lot of work as a culture and as a leader to really be more accepting of the diversity of different ways of leading, it's going to be challenging to show up and really be accepted for your best leadership style.
This is where the important work of discovering your strengths comes in. As you were listening to me describe how I show up in a certain place of being an achiever and an activator, if I can't understand that through my own lens, how on earth could anyone else understand what is happening? But the other part of that is that it just helps me so much as a leader to understand who I'm serving with, who I'm working with, who is on my team, who I'm collaborating with. Because if I don't have that, I'm assuming through my lens that they see and hear and lead like I do. And I question their motivation when they don't show up like I do. And when I all of a sudden can give language to the fact that we're really hearing and speaking two different languages here, oh, there's just so much more understanding. And that's why this work is just so important. And again, that's leading yourself.
I love that you said that. I say all the time. So yes, we see the world through the filter of our own strengths, our own talents, our own experiences. And when people don't show up in a way that makes sense to us, we make quick assumptions and judgments about their motivation. We assume motivation. And strengths really, as an assessment, is measuring motivation. The motivations are even more important to understand than the typical behavior. And I think understanding motivators builds bridges to grace and having more grace for each other and growing in that collaboration. I don't believe there is any one right way to lead, because there are a billion ways for people to show up based on each individual person. But there are some practices that are important for people if they're going to be grounded. If they're going to be grounded as a leader and help themselves and others grow, there are some practices for leadership more important, I think, than even skills.
So we are here to help facilitate this conversation. And I love the conversation that we've had today. And we are going to be able to go deep dive into many different aspects of leadership.
So to answer, I think the original question, there is no one way to lead. There is no right formula. There is no combination of skills and strengths that guarantees effectiveness as a leader. Instead, it's our responsibility to show up grounded and practicing leadership in a way that is intentional so that we can continue to grow, we can grow the people that we work with, and of course, we can achieve the outcomes that we're setting out to do.
This conversation is so important, and we are just beginning and we are practicing. So thank you for being with us on the journey of what it is to bring these conversations to you. We love being authentic with you in that we will show up very real for you. And in this beginning part of our podcast, it will look a bit more raw than, of course, we would be comfortable with if we had been doing this for a long time. We've been intentional about not measuring ourselves by our favorite podcast people.
Yeah.
Because we do want to look like who we are. And we believe that there's something really powerful in the dynamic of what we're able to bring to teams as a leadership team ourselves. Mm-hmm. The gift that we have is that we were introduced to each other many years ago, and we found ourselves in a space that we could see and give voice to different things as we met with teams in a way that completed something that was stronger than if we did it alone. So we want to do this together. And I love that. And we'll bring other guests in as we do. We'll be able to continue the leadership conversation. And Tara, I'm so glad that we get to start this together today.
I am as well. And you'll notice as we go through, grounding and growing is Pamela and Tara. Pamela's zone, her lane really is around ensuring that people are grounded. And my lane is helping people grow. But one can't happen without the other. We do not arrive. We never arrive as leaders. And that really is one of the core philosophies that we have. We are always becoming, and grounding and growing is part of that becoming process.
So welcome. We are so glad that you are with us. We would love for you to share this podcast. We'd love for you to give us your feedback and join in on the conversation. We want to invite you to ask questions and say, what would you like to hear from us in the podcast? And what would be a great topic that you would like us to cover? You can email tara@aligntransform.com.
So as we wrap up this conversation about leadership, we want to invite you to put something into practice. As a leader, where are you showing up raw in your talents and strengths? Where do you have an opportunity to grow your talents and strengths? Where are you showing up mature? At the end of each podcast, we are going to ask you to practice or put something into practice. So we encourage you to take a little bit of time in the next day to just think about, where are you showing up raw? Where are you showing up mature? And where could you be more intentional?
Come on.